Culture, welcome. Hello everyone, Dara Stewart here and welcome back to the Inner Insights podcast. This week I'm joined by a truly inspiring guest, Tommy Ó Conghaile, someone whose work feels especially important in Ireland right now. In this conversation we explore the revival of the Irish language and the culture, the role of plant medicine and the deeper ways these threads connect to healing and spirituality. Tommy is an Irish language writer, translator and organiser from just outside Newry in South Armagh. He is the founder of the cultural magazine Nos, has presented on the BBC and TG Ceathair, and campaigns for the Irish language rights in the north of Ireland. He has also worked with the European Union, and for the past decade Tommy has been exploring the therapeutic power of the Irish language revitalisation and how plant medicine and spiritual practice can support both personal and collective healing. He is currently writing his first book, a travel and healing memoir titled Tor na Grianne, In Search of the Sun. I know you'll all really enjoy this episode, I certainly did, and a big graw more to Tommy for his incredible work and for sharing this powerful conversation. Fáilte Road, Tommy.
Gormaigh Dara.
Great to have you on the podcast.
It's fantastic to be here. Great to see you again.
Yeah, thanks so much for taking the time, and really looking forward to getting into a little bit about your life and the Irish language and all the work that you're doing in the world. So maybe we'll start with a little bit about your roots. You know, where did you grow up? How did that kind of build the man you are today?
Yeah, Dara. So I'm from outside Newry in South Armagh, so really a couple of kilometres from the border. And I was born in the early 80s, just in the middle of the Troubles, I guess. I was born and bred there. My family, both sides are from the area. Went to school in Newry. And it was really, in the Irish language terms, it was really when I was young, quite young, that I realised it existed. But because we're from the north, we didn't get a chance to learn it. So I would have seen it in match programmes, going to football matches, GA matches with my dad, seeing the Irish language written in programmes, would have known that it was around me, heard it in the loudspeaker at the games. But in primary school, we didn't really get to do any. It depends what school you go to in the north. It's not compulsory like it is in the Republic. So it was really only when I went to secondary school in Newry, so Coleman's College, where I got the chance to, first of all, learn it. And it just seemed very, very natural, normal. The teacher told us that most of our surnames come from Irish. The place names, the places where we lived, come from Irish. I guess I'd been to London a couple of years previously when I was younger, and I heard people speaking different languages. I went back home, I'm Irish, but I'm speaking English. So this sort of stayed with me. And also my friends at the same time came to this realisation. We probably wouldn't have worded it this way, but it just felt very natural, normal. This is our language. This is something that we should be going towards, investigating. And I guess I fell in love with it, in early teens, 11, 12, 13. And then went ahead then into the Gaeilge, studied it for GCSE, A-level, the equivalent of Leaving Cert and Junior Cert, and studied Irish and Spanish in university here in Dublin. And so it was when I was quite younger that I realised that this is something that suits me. And there would have been a bit of negativity around it. Oh, what are you going to do with that when you're older? But for me and for my friends at that age, it wasn't really about getting jobs or anything like that. It was just like something that felt very natural, normal as Irish people that we, should be doing.
Mm-hmm. Wow, amazing. I think there's such a cultural heaviness around Irish, and I experienced that as well growing up, as in it was like people were saying, oh, it's a dead language. It's, you shouldn't bother learning it. What's the point? You can't use it. No one uses it. But to see people like you, I have you on this podcast because you really inspire me around the Irish language. And I feel like we're living in a bit of a cultural revolution at the moment and revival. So can you kind of speak to that? How it's like, it's not dead. It's so alive and it's really coming through very strong for a lot of people.
Oh, it is without a doubt. And I guess there's different reasons behind that, Dara. I think one of the things is that in general, as Irish people, we're probably getting more confidence about ourselves. We are a unique situation in Europe that we're one of the only countries in Europe that was probably colonised. And I think people felt quite awkward talking about that until recently. And we realise this now. And even though it wasn't maybe, the first thing that we would think about every day, it was always there. This heaviness was there about ourselves, that our sense of identity was maybe attacked over the centuries. And we've maybe lost a bit of our inner confidence, And maybe as we grow away from the actual colonial times, especially in the Republic, obviously it lasted a bit longer in the North, maybe the confidence is rising about ourselves. When I was younger, of course, and when you hear our parents talk and previous generations, there was a lot of negativity about the language in general. about the music even. People call it, oh, that's only diddly-dee music. Dancing as well, and ourselves. And I think maybe younger generations are finding more confidence, and just connected to that then is Irish. People want to connect with our identity, who we are. And for me, the Irish language is a very, very positive representation of who we are as a people. You don't need a flag. You don't need any other labels. It's something just very raw and natural and just ripped open. Just the language itself, all it is words, and vibrations and noise. So I think it's a very positive aspect of who we are as a people. And I think people are really connecting with that. In general, people are searching for something as well, as we all know. There's a big need for an inner, fill up our inner well. People do it in many, many different ways through music and dance and, different modalities, healing modalities. But the language and culture in general is a way, another way for people to tap into that. So that's coming through. Something that's happening at the moment too is music, kneecap. I don't know if they've been mentioned on the podcast yet, but they've been everywhere in the news recently. They're controversial, they push buttons, but the reason why people love them as well is because they're very talented. So there's a lot of creativity in the Irish language, and not just kneecap, other bands as well, artists, designers. There's new podcasts on the scene. There's writers, and our poets have always been there. But I guess that this creativity is coming through the language as well. It's a means to to show who we are. So I think a lot of people are really realizing this now, on the shackles of the past, and that it was connect with poverty. Wasn't that many opportunities in language in the past, but it's gradually changing. And there's loads of, even on a work basis, vocationally, there's a lot of opportunities for people as well. So yeah, it's great to see, and it's inspiring, it's fantastic. I would like to point out too, but there's a couple of narratives with the Irish language. So there's this narrative that we're just talking about now, this new recent revival. And the revival's been going on for like 150 years. This is like the more recent wave of it, and it's very, very positive. But also the language is struggling in the heartlands. So in the Gaeltacht areas, so I guess this is an issue for rural Ireland in general, that less services, less access to provisions. A lot of young people in the Gaeltacht areas can't get planning permission for houses. There's a lot of campaigns at the moment. One called Bandu, another called Tinchan. Young people in Connemara, Donegal, Kerry, who can't live in the place they want to live in, their own area. They want to bring up families speaking Irish, and they can't. So that's a big issue at the moment. So the Gaeltachts are definitely under pressure, and we should be aware of that. But at the same time, mainly on the East Coast, Dublin, Belfast, there's this sort of urban revival, which is very inspiring. So there's the two sides of the coin. And the way I look at the Gaeltacht, I wouldn't be speaking Irish. The last 25 years of my life wouldn't have existed without the well of heritage and amazing richness of language and just community vibes in the Gaeltacht. It's when you go there first as a young fella or a young girl, you go, wow, Irish is really living here. Coming from Newry in South Armagh, Irish was spoken in my area maybe 4 generations ago, so it wasn't that long ago. My grandparents actually remembered the old people in South Armagh speaking Irish in the 1920s and 1930s. But as a community language, it died out by the time I came along. So just saying that in the Gaeltacht was always amazing. But without the Gaeltacht, we wouldn't exist. The revival we have now in Belfast and Dublin and other cities, the Gaeltacht nourished us. So maybe it's our time, the energy that we have on the East Coast and in more urban areas, maybe it's time for us to help the Gaeltacht out. And it is happening, but I think it's important to be aware of that,
Wow, that's amazing. I had no awareness of that, that people are really struggling out there. I know the brain drain, people grow up and there's no jobs and they need to leave, but being able to live and, practice their own culture and language in the place that they're from, it kind of, it's kind of this thought of like the colonization, and you kind of touched on that there a little bit. We're still living in this era where we're still finding our feet in Ireland and, decolonializing ourselves and our minds and our language and our spirituality. I was at a conference there last week, Breaking Convention UK, and there was a New Zealander, and he got up, and when he got up, he spoke his language, he sang a prayer, sang a song, and he had so much heart, and he was talking about the culture of the Maori and how they've been, colonized and suppressed, and everything he was saying, I was just ticking the boxes. That's all Ireland. That was all Ireland, the exact same. And it was like this kind of resonance of, wow, look at him up there. His culture is so alive and it's really coming true. And I was like, yeah, it's really kind of the same for Ireland right now, I feel. It's like, I'm getting more proud of having a couple of fuckle and like sharing a few words here and there. And yeah, I think some of the best crack I had was going to the Gaeltacht when I was younger. And I actually felt recently of like, I want to go back to the Gaeltacht. I want to go and immerse myself in the language. And it was kind of like moving through this piece of shame almost. which you were kind of touching on upon there a little bit. You know, people, you know, had to have this shame of the language, and we were ashamed to speak our own language. And I think it really was disconnecting us from our culture and our power and our spirituality ultimately.
Yeah, definitely, Dara. And it is an international issue. You know, you mentioned the people in the Maori in New Zealand, Indigenous Americans and Australians and other people in Europe. So it's not just ourselves. You know, a lot of people would, you know, who maybe talk negatively about the Irish language. Oh, it's only connected to Ireland. What are you going to do with it? But it actually makes us more connected to other people around the planet in similar circumstances. So I find that over the years, you know, I found something in common. If I speak my own language, especially if it's a language that's been oppressed and suppressed over the years, and there's now a revival, I have something in common with people in Scotland, in Wales, in the Basque Country, in Catalonia, other places in Europe, native Indigenous people throughout the planet. So that connection is fantastic. And yeah, the shame issue, there's many, many layers to it, you know. But without a doubt, you know, you mentioned that there's a spiritual element to it. And years ago when I was younger, again, when I was learning Irish as a teenager and most of my 20s, I wouldn't have really put it in this terms, but
Same. Yeah.
It definitely is. It definitely is there. And for me, I became aware of this through the ancestral connection. And it's maybe not something that's spoken about a lot in the Irish language world at the moment, but it's getting more prevalent. Without a doubt, you know, there's cultural reasons for learning the language. There's identity reasons. In the north, because of our situation, we're in a state that was very hostile to the language over the years. There's a political element as well. But for me now, as a man in my early 40s, and over the last 10 years, there's definitely a spiritual element. And it's sort of, I remember being on a train in California years ago. I sat down, the guy beside me was from Navajo. Guy, interesting character, like he had a very, very interesting life. I can't really tell you what he was, you know, on this podcast, what he was doing and everything else. But we got chatting anyway. Had a couple of coffees and maybe something a bit stronger too. And he was telling me about his culture and his language. And I told him I'm from Ireland. I'm involved in the Irish language revitalisation. He said, that's wonderful. We're doing the same for the Navajo. And it wasn't the first thing he mentioned, but maybe after a while he said, oh, one of the reasons we're doing it is to heal the ancestors. Right? It stuck with me, that phrase. And then a while later, I was chatting to people, Aboriginal people from Australia, who said the same thing. But in a European context, Western societies where language revitalisation is happening, we don't talk like that. We do mention the more practical reasons and also the cultural creativity and that richness, but we don't really go into the ancestral or spiritual side of things.
Yeah.
And it was really only with plant medicine over the last number of years where it sort of clicked.
Yeah.
There is an ancestral element. And obviously epigenetics, and you know a lot about this, Dara, you know that any experience stays, our genes can switch on or switch off, positive experiences and negative experiences. And we know that in many parts of the country, the language is lost quite traumatically.
Yeah.
And there's really, really horrible stories of parents not speaking to their kids, you know, anecdotal evidence, you know, around the country and in my own area as well in South Ulster, where parents thought it was better for them not to speak to their kids. Because they thought they were going to weigh the kids down with Irish.
Yeah.
So they didn't speak to them at all. Because these parents couldn't speak English either. The kids were getting English from the school, English only system in the school. A lot of the priests, to tell you the truth, were also saying the same thing. It was only out of Maynooth. There was really an English language project coming from Maynooth as well. So the Catholic Church, apart from a few priests, were sort of pushing the English language as well. And these poor parents, you know, in the middle of the 19th century, late 19th century, thought there was no other choice but that the kids were going to leave, you know, and they needed English. So imagine that emotional disconnect. Imagine not getting that love and that connection from your parents. And that stayed in us, no doubt about it. And I got some insights, you know, over the years with plant medicine that, yeah, what's the best way to heal that language lost trauma, and that cultural lost trauma, than their descendants, people like myself and many others throughout the island, to reconnect with the language again and to learn it again. Now, it's not going to be a valid reason for everybody. There's loads of different reasons to get in touch with the Irish language. But I think for a lot of us who were maybe indigenously from here, who have Gaelic surnames, who've been speaking English for the last number of generations, I think a lot of that shame and that pain, you know, it's coming from this sort of ancestral heaviness. And it's not the only way to heal it, but one of the ways to heal it is actually to relearn the language again.
Beautiful.
And I think that's definitely, on my own personal level, I'm very aware of that now. And at the start, it felt uncomfortable even to talk about it because nobody else was really saying this.
Yeah.
It sounds a bit sort of wishy-washy.
Yeah.
But I really, really think there's something to it. And I've written about it recently. I've put up a few articles on Nos, the cultural magazine that's set up, and more people are talking about it. And it seems to be a bit of a sea change. And a bit like what you mentioned, the revival in general. There's a new wave of this revival. And I think this is part of it. You know, this sort of the deeper element to why we're speaking the language, why we're reconnecting with it. There definitely is a healing element.
That's beautiful. So well said. And there's so many points I want to touch on there. But it's like this idea of intergenerational trauma. You know, Gabor Mate talks a lot about this, of, you know, the grandparents, they get on and live their life as best they can, and whatever gets passed on to the parents, and then maybe the parents stop a little bit of that, if they've done a little bit of inner work, and then a cultural load gets passed on, or a family load gets passed on to the children. And I think we're really in a space where people have the opportunity now to heal family systems, heal family dynamics, and heal themselves and work on this kind of ancestral trauma or the intergenerational suffering that's been passed down. And through plant medicine, and especially my work in Inward Bound, I've seen a lot of that. People crying for Ireland, crying for the land, crying for the language, the loss of music. And it's not just even them, it's their parents as well. Like, they're grieving for their parents and the lives that were lost or suppressed.
Exactly.
So for anybody who doesn't really understand how this kind of intergenerational trauma works, it's kind of like that. It goes back and back and back. And I think, a lot of people, especially the American diaspora from Ireland, who are like, Irish American, a lot of their journey is trying to trace back their roots, trying to trace back their lineage. And I think, when people work with plant medicine, altered states of consciousness, you want to know where you came from.
Exactly.
It's like you want to trace it back down. And when you trace it back down, there's suffering in the family, there's trauma in the family, but there's also this wonderful wisdom and gifts and beauty that's also passed down through your ancestral line and your lineage. And that's a huge journey for a lot of people, unlocking that and opening that up.
Definitely, Dara. And you mentioned something interesting there about the diaspora. We're very blessed that we're still in the land. A lot of us are still in the land that where people are from.
Mm-hmm.
So people in other countries, around the planet have an extra disconnect, and they come back here or come back to other places in Europe or other parts of the planet trying to find their ancestors. We're sort of in many ways, a step ahead because we're still here.
Mm-hmm.
So that to make that connection is sort of easier, I think, and we do have a lot of traditions have passed down through the people as well. We're trying to heal on some sort of energetic level, but there's a lot of like pointers we have in the land, our holy wells, prayers that the family might have said, old sites that people would still have a lot of respect for.
Sacred sites.
So we're very, very lucky that we're still here. We've lost a lot, no doubt about it. But I think I don't think there's anything false about trying to fill in the gaps either, A lot of people might think that, oh no, if we've lost it, we can't really go back to it. Everything else to try and, if you like, sort of manifest something new isn't going to be authentic. But we're on the land. We are the descendants of the people who lived here and who practiced on this land and who interacted with the landscape. And via the language or dance or music or whatever practice you'd like, I think we can. There's something we know in ourselves if something is sort of makes sense or is true.
Mm-hmm.
There's an instinct. We know, oh yeah, saying this wee prayer now in Irish or walking around this site, or it feels normal, it feels natural. There's nothing sort of artificial about it.
Yeah.
And I have no qualms whatsoever about sort of filling in these gaps and being creative with it as well,
Mm-hmm.
And again, just trusting our instinct is that, we're from this place, we're from this land, we've been here a long, long time. The land, like the energy of the universe, all we are is the energy of the universe manifesting through Ireland, through our own bodies, through what we speak and say and how we act. And if we trust that sort of energy flowing through, I think, we're going to find some sort of way, some sort of path, despite the fact that we've gone through a lot. We've been colonized and we've lost a lot. But I think, there's a lot of fantastic positive work going on.
Absolutely.
It's inspiring.
Absolutely. And I think, even talking to a lot of, mainland European people, we're actually quite lucky because I think because Ireland's been on the edge of the periphery, we didn't get totally messed up by the Romans.
Yes, yeah, exactly. Yeah, they never came here.
Yeah. So, we still have a lot of our sacred sites and they're, a lot of them are in quite disrepair, which is a whole other conversation for another day. I feel, how these beautiful places are getting vandalized and destroyed, and there's wonderful people like Lar Dooley doing great work trying to, get awareness and funding around some of the sacred sites. But we're so lucky that we still have that rich cultural tradition of language, of poetry, of music, traditional music. That's all it's like very, very vibrant. Where I know, for example, in England, the UK, they're really trying to find it again, But I feel like we're actually further ahead in a way in terms of we still have a lot of stuff quite enshrined in our culture and in our land.
That's true, and it might be sort of a positive side effect of colonization because we lost our sort of our aristocratic level of society that they were forced to leave. And essentially, we didn't really have an upper class, an indigenous upper class. The upper class and the people who had the power and the money came from the island next door. So that sort of very much, I think, communalized the music. Because in mainland Europe, a lot of the sort of more developed like music traditions were kept for the sort of more wealthy upper class people who had the power. And in Ireland, the fantastic traditions of the harp and the poetry, they weren't in the courts anymore. They weren't in the Gaelic aristocracy. They were sort of among the people. So that was very much so for the last number of 100 years, the language and the music and the literature of the people. So I think that's one of the reasons we were able to hold on to this, whereas in parts of mainland Europe and in England and so on, where the society was more stratified, they sort of, it was like an elite pursuit, some of the music and so on, where we sort of really kept that and became a part of just general society. So yeah, I think we're lucky, we're blessed, and we should recognise that. And there's a fantastic, you're right, there's fantastic richness in there that we can use, and we are like, I don't want to say a step ahead, but like we should realise that what we have, and I think more people are realising what we have, and they're wanting to connect with that. And it goes back again to what we spoke about earlier on about the language revival, more confidence in our own traditions and what they can offer us, what they can actually give us some sort of maybe inner peace. They can allow us to connect more. That's the big thing for us, I guess, We love connecting and having the crack, and music has always been a part of that, And people don't realise, but it's medicine in itself, There really is. Like, there's a therapeutic value to the way the Irish people interact with each other, and the type of crack we have, and the company, and what we say, and the stories. And that's all part of our tradition. Maybe it came out of pain, some of it, because we had to deal with life in certain ways and maybe joke about it.
Yeah.
And we're maybe very too good at deflecting sometimes.
I was just about to say that.
Yeah. But at the same time, there's value in it, in that connection and the crack that we have as Irish people,
Yeah. For me, there's nothing more beautiful and like straight in the heart when you hear someone sing some sean-nós.
Yeah.
Kind of cuts straight in, and I think it touches a part of my soul where I'm just like, or someone really good on the fiddle or something like that. I think it's quite activating.
Yeah.
And I love this idea of like, the land giving us, the energy up through us, and our land is our medicine, and our medicine comes from the land. And, we have a lot of these sacred sites and power places and kind of spiritual places in Ireland that people will go to and connect into. And I feel for me, I'm loving in the work of Manchon,
Oh, definitely, yeah.
Listen to the land speak, and 32 words for field, and how he really puts it, how the place names, they hold energy, these places hold energy, they hold a memory, a living memory. And, on my own journey, going to these places and connecting to them, for me, that's what kind of Celtic spirituality is, being out in the land, listening to nature, the elements, being with, these parts of our land, and getting informed through the land, through like watching the nature, the birds, and I feel like there's quite a revival in the kind of more paganistic, animistic shamanism, to use that term. We would have like the Druids and Driocht, I suppose, if you want to say it like that. And we have this kind of magic intertwined in our kind of spirituality, don't we?
Oh, without a doubt, Dara. The land. As you mentioned, the places where I'm from myself in South Armagh. The centre of South Armagh is a mountain called Slieve Gullion, and Slieve Gullion it's in many of our most important sagas and mythology stories. There's connections to Finn McCool, to Cuchulainn, Tainbo Cuailnge, the cattle raid of Cooley. But interestingly enough, so obviously it was a sacred mountain, and through plant medicine myself, sort of connecting with the mountain, I saw a lot of energy, almost an anger in the mountain, which was very interesting. This sort of female power from the mountain herself, and sort of Ireland manifesting through the mountain. Cailleach Vera, the hag, this sort of archetype of the hag, is also connected to the mountain. So I think there was something going on there. But it was very interesting that when Christianity arrived to Ireland, she was to be a saint later, a woman who was connected with Breege and Fahard, which isn't too far from me either, called Menina or Blinye, left into the wilds, they said. So at this time, there was nobody living in South Armagh or at the bottom of the mountain. And she set up her first convent right at the bottom of Slieve Gullion. So I think for me, and we found out in a manuscript that there was, I think, 11 virgins with her who set up this convent, but one of them had a son. So I don't know how that worked. But he was called Luar, which means Lu, the god Lu, sun god, and Far, man. So man of Lu. So even in this early Christian convent, they were still calling their kids after the sun god Lu. So, and it struck me that she set up her convent right at the bottom of the sacred mountain of Slieve Gullion. So the interaction as well is for me, I think maybe a lot of us, because the church has lost it, the Catholic Church in Ireland has lost its sway. A lot of us people were put off by the scandals and the hierarchy, the all male sort of system that was in place. and I guess a lot of us would still hold a lot of maybe negativity towards the church for those reasons. But at the same time, the interaction between our indigenous traditions and Christianity was very, very interesting. And there's a lot, instead of throwing the baby out with the bathwater and saying all the sort of Christian tradition doesn't really have anything for us, I think, we have a chance and an opportunity in Ireland to again reform, what Christianity could look like for many people. And again, taking in our more paganistic, shamanistic, land-based, traditions. And I think that can be a very, very positive thing. And I think I see that with a lot of people, they can sort of easily mix perhaps, praying to Breach and praying to the local mountain, And for me, it's not a contradiction.
Mm-hmm.
If all these wisdom traditions and holy traditions and, religions of the planet are all sort of going the same direction towards unity, love, connection,
compassion,
why can't we sort of, sometimes pick up from one tradition and something else from another tradition? If they're all pointing the same way, other people would take quite a negative approach to this and go, no, that's a la carte, you're mixing up things, you have to stay true to one path.
Mm-hmm.
But again, if they're all sort of speaking about the same thing, taking us in the same direction, I think it can be quite interesting, and the world is connecting all the time. We're traveling more than ever. We're on the internet. We're learning about traditions from the East, from the West. And I think Ireland, a lot more people are maybe, mixing up and happy enough to take things that we have before Christianity, a bit of Christianity, something from India. It doesn't matter. If it makes you feel good, and it makes you feel connected to the land, if it sort of raises your spirits, helps you to be present. I know you're a big fan of Ram Dass. If it helps us to be here now, be in Seanish, ain't that brilliant,
Yeah, I love that. No, it's so well put. And I really love this kind of we're in this point now, I think, in spirituality where there's many traditions being blended. And you're totally right. If you're not harming anyone and you're living from a place of kindness, compassion, then what does it matter? What you're using, because I'm quite like that. I have many different kind of modalities I go down, many different ways of seeing the world. And I love all the different perspectives. And I think in Ireland, I've talked to a lot of people about that over the years, mainly when I went to Trinity, when I went to study science, there were so many people completely no, I'm atheist, I'm agnostic now. And they completely just cut themselves off, but they were also cutting themselves off from a sense of, I thought, spirituality as well. And now I see there's definitely this rise in kind of Christ consciousness, and people are more in touch with their kind of own divinity and what comes with that, compassion, seeing others as a reflection of yourself and kind of treating other people as you want to be treated yourself. And it's though there are those little nuggets in Christianity, but unfortunately, the power dynamics and the patriarchy and all that kind of stuff that humans do to gain control and power has been on top. But yeah, you're really right. I think we're in a time now where we can kind of almost write our spirituality. I love the work of John Donahue. He's one of my for sure biggest teachers, and he was a priest, and same with Anthony de Mello, a Jesuit priest as well. I love his writing. He's so to the point. He also psychotherapist, but it's kind of not making it dogmatic. What's true for you may not necessarily be true for someone else. So, if you can both live in harmony and get along, then great.
Exactly, yeah. And somebody else I really admire, Michael Harding. I was talking to him recently, and he was talking about the decolonization of spirituality and religion.
Okay.
In the past, there were structures. The Catholic Church was a definite structure. There's men in charge, and you had to go through the church to maybe get in touch with your own spirituality. And now we're sort of decolonizing that. We're opening that up, and we're taking more control for ourselves. More autonomy, more personal autonomy. With respect to the traditions, it's important. I think a lot of these traditions are coming down over millennia, and they have a lot of fantastic wisdom and traditions and valued teachings. But at the same time, we can sort of take back some of that power to ourselves. And that's, I guess, that I'm very open to that, and I think it's a positive step rather than the opposite.
Oh, absolutely. And you've been out on one of the men's retreats in Sligo, and it's this idea of sovereignty, taking back your power from where it was lost. And maybe it was lost 3 generations ago. Yeah. And now you're I'm here, I'm able to practice my culture, my language, I'm able to live the spirit of my land through me and connect to people and help others. It's a big part of my mission. But I think this is really important for men nowadays. A lot of men are kind of, there's a spiritual vacuum out there. There's a lot of men are lost. They don't have a sense of purpose. They're looking for fulfillment. they've lost their drive, they've lost their soulfulness. And I think by connecting back to the land and our culture, and even for me in my own journey, the language, how rich it is in poetic beauty.
Yeah. Oh, definitely, Dara. You know, the vacuum is there, you know, and it's the society, because of our history, obviously, and the colonization and everything we've gone through as a people. But in the wider Western, you know, society sense, you know, it's, you know, the focus has been on the wrong things, really, and people are realizing this. You know, it's not just about getting the job or money or, you know, the things you're told in school and the things that society told us were important. People are realizing now, well, maybe they're not. They are important. They have a role in our lives, but there's something else. If we don't have that other connection, if we don't really have a bigger purpose in life, if we don't feel that, and I think in the past, maybe religion was the way for people to feel that connection.
Mm-hmm.
Now those religious structures have fallen apart and people don't really have anywhere to go. A lot of people don't have anywhere to go. So a lot of searching going on. And you see that at the fantastic work you're doing at the men's retreats. We all have the similar themes, similar issues, similar problems, and we get a chance to come together at the you know, the weekends and other events that you and other people organise. And it's just fantastic just to sit with people, because men, maybe we keep things in ourselves. It's a bit of a stereotype, a bit of a cliche, but it's true.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I know myself that, you know, I thought I was the only person with certain problems, you know,
Mm-hmm.
until I talked to somebody else. And over a few pints, you can do it to a certain level. But if you really want to get deeper, if you really want to go in and connect and see and really, really realise that you have something in common with the other fellas around you, you need to get rid of the alcohol. You need to get rid of the drugs. You need to sit down and, you know, be in a fantastic circle, in a safe space where people are feel happy enough and content to open up. And that's where the magic happens.
Mm-hmm.
And then you realise there's always something in those conversations that you're going to pick up or learn from, you know. And it really is that sort of, that, again, it's like a realisation that we're not alone, that we're all connected, that there's something magic inside us. There really, really is. There's a brilliant, amazing energy that it's really, really difficult to describe or difficult to even work out what it is, but it's there. It's in us.
Mm-hmm.
And if we can find ways to connect with this more, then things start to open up, you know, and your mental health will improve, your relationships will improve, and life, it doesn't get really easier overnight, but
Mm-hmm.
with time, you know, and really for me, this sort of sense of that there's a light inside me, you know, that there's something inside me, there's an energy inside me, but it's not just inside me, it's in everything,
Yeah.
you know, and if we can connect with this more,
Mm-hmm.
and this is sort of the gap, I think, this is sort of the hunger to try and find what this is. And we maybe won't know what it is, but even just to sense it. And that's where this fantastic work comes through, you know, and all these healing modalities and the searching. The language is definitely a part of that for me. And even in my own practice now, like I try to have as much as a daily practice as possible, but it goes in and out and up and down. And as you know yourself, it can be difficult to stay on track, if you like.
Absolutely.
But I involve now the Irish language in my own practice. So I try to do a short yoga practice every morning. I don't know if you come across the 5 Tibetans.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. You spin around and it's just sort of yoga practices. There's a bit of a myth behind it that there was some British Army officer found it spoke to a lama in the early 20th century and wrote down these 5 practices that they do. But it's a nice, you can do it within 10, 15 minutes, a yoga practice. And then after that, I would do a short meditation. But at the end of that, then I do a chant, like in Irish. And I'm getting it from a Sanskrit chant, Loka samasta sukano bhavantu.
Mm-hmm.
You know, may all beings be happy.
Mm.
And I've translated it into Irish. And I just say that now as part of my practice, you know, most mornings. And I just try to it's a bit like the Buddhist tradition, you know, of the metta bhavana. Try to fill yourself up with love and then spread it out. But for me, I've taken that chant from Sanskrit and Gaelicized it, if you like, and it sort of feels more my own, if it feels more comfortable in Irish.
Mm.
And so I'm trying to integrate the language in my own things I've picked up from other traditions and other workshops and over the years, but sort of, you know, putting an Irish slant on it. And for me, that's important. And I just sort of chant away for a few minutes most mornings.
That's so beautiful. I have one like Uskal McCree, you know.
Exactly.
Uskal McCree,
you know, stuff like this, you know. And so the language, I mean, people maybe say, oh, the language is so beautiful and it's so full of magic and mysticism. And that's true. But at the same time, Irish is also a very practical language. You know, people are paying their accounts in Irish. They're having arguments in Irish. They're going to school in Irish, doing their homework. People are paying bills, making love. You know, it's a language of the 21st century. You know, Irish can do everything. Anything that English can do and Spanish and all these world languages, Irish can do it as well.
Yeah.
And people are doing that in Irish. But also, of course, because it's from this land, it's speaking from the land, speaking through us, it does have this healing quality as well.
Yeah, beautiful.
And I think in the Irish language world, as an Irish language speaker and an active Irish language, you know, member of the community, we don't really speak a lot about the more healing side of things. You know, it's interesting. We're sort of, you know, we're focused on language revival. We want to create as many opportunities for Irish speakers as possible. We want to create as many services. Anything that's available in English should be available in Irish. I worked in Irish language media for years. It was important for me to promote the language through radio and TV and magazines and events and concerts and gigs and festivals. So we're very much, as a language community, we're very much focused on the practical side of things, creating more speakers and setting up schools, creating community. But I think more of us now are realising, there's also a maybe a more unseen element and a more like a deeper element. And for a lot of us, it feels a bit sort of strange. You know, it seems a bit too mystical for many like daily Irish speakers. But I'd like to sort of incorporate it in a bit, and I think more people are as well, and to get in touch with this healing side of things. And I don't think Irish is unique that it has like healing in the sounds. I think every language can. Even English, you know, even this big colonial language that we're speaking right now, it depends how you use it and what you say and the meaning and the intention behind it. Yeah. Perhaps, of course, there's some studies done and some evidence to suggest that Irish has more open vowel sounds, as, a, ta, la. So perhaps it creates a different frequency and resonance in the chest. So it might vibrate your lungs and your heart at a different frequency than English, for example, that has slightly more closed vowel sounds. So that might have a general influence, but it's not very, very clear yet. Hopefully there could be studies done in this in the future. But something that is true with all languages is just how you use it, the intentions you put in. If you have a lot of negativity and a lot of darkness inside you, and you're going to give that to somebody else, doesn't matter if you're speaking in Irish or Hindi or Swahili, whatever else, it's going to have a bad effect. But if you're coming from a good place with an open heart, with a sense of connection, compassion, love, Irish can be a vehicle, but also English, also Welsh, also Basque, also Russian. So it really depends on where we are and where our heart is and our mind is.
Absolutely, I fully agree with that, and it's like the intentionality behind it.
Yeah,
and like I know so many people at the moment who are like learning Sanskrit now. Because they see it as like a spiritual language, a language of it's one of the languages of Buddhism and yoga, and I think Irish can be that. And I love how you say that when we start to connect to that, it kind of invigorates us because it's from our land. And as well in the kind of the plant medicine world, people are like flying out to Peru and all these foreign kind of countries to learn about spirituality and medicine and healing. But like we have it here in Ireland too.
Yeah, we do. And there's a lot of value in that, obviously. I'm very interested in other cultures as well. And I've been to Asia. I was traveling for 5 months last year in Central and South America. I was fascinated by it. Met up with some Quechua language activists in Lima.
Wow.
I was telling them about the Fania, because Quechua is interesting. It's quite millions of speakers in Peru and in the Andes in general. But the state, there's official status of some kind, but they lack confidence. You can just see it in them. They're at a stage slightly further back than we are as a people. The confidence is lacking in Quechuan speakers, and all the signs are in Spanish still in Peru. And in the city, I think there's almost like a million Quechuan speakers in Lima, but they're invisible. They only talk to each other if they know that they speak Quechua. So I told them about the Fania. So that's a fantastic idea. You can spot a Quechuan speaker. Imagine if you had a sign for the Quechuan speakers, you could spot it,
Wow.
I also told them about the pop-up Gaeilge talks, pick a restaurant, pick a bar. They don't really have the same drinking culture as we do, but pick somewhere and just flood it with Quechuan speakers for a while, So it's fascinating meeting people from those places and seeing the traditions and the spirituality behind it. But as you say, we have that as well, and we can use Irish here for good, as a force of good, force of positivity, for reconnection, for rising up this light that's inside all of us, and Irish can be a vehicle for that.
That's amazing. I think Mancon has a book out recently called Brehons and Brahmins.
He does indeed, yeah.
I'm looking forward to reading it now, but it's kind of like drawing the parallels between the Vedic, Hindu philosophy and culture compared to the Gaelic kind of culture, and how a lot of the Irish words are quite similar to the Sanskrit words. And,
definitely, they're both Indo-European languages. Like Sanskrit's on one side of the planet, and we're at the other end of the language continuum, here in the west coast of Europe, and there's a lot of connections linguistically. Perhaps some of them are still to be definitely proven, but they're, of course, with the Brehon system and almost like sort of caste system that we would have had, sort of layers of the poets, the bards, the druids. We don't know exactly how that looked, but we're sort of filling in the gaps bit by bit. And I have the book. I got it for Christmas.
Nice.
My partner got it for Christmas. So there's fantastic things. Lovely. It's very beautifully illustrated as well. Yeah. So you're going to enjoy it.
Nice. I got. I think my mum bought me Hector's new book.
Oh yes, he has one out as well. So it's fantastic to see. People are realizing that there's people are actually interested in the words and how there's this deeper aspect to the language too, you know. So it's, and people like Hector, you might not have expected Hector 20 years ago to take out such a book, but it's, you know, it's brilliant to see, you know.
Yeah, and like you know, when I go away and people always ask me, do I speak the language? And I say, you know, I have a very small amount. You know, I really struggled with Irish growing up. I struggled with English just as much.
You're not doing too bad there.
Thanks. It's been a work in progress. But you know, when I'm trying to describe to people about the Gaelic language, I say, you know, how we describe our world with English can be very like mono and dull. You know, I think the English language evolved in order for functionality, you know, very easy to communicate many kind of dialects, where Gaelic kind of has this very poetic way of seeing the world. And the more I realize, and maybe, you know, the more psychedelics I do, the more I realize how language can literally shape our reality and build our reality. You know, how you speak to your parents and the language you use with your parents shapes your relationship in that moment with your parents. So if you start to kind of work with your language, you can actually start to manifest your reality a little bit, and kind of you cultivate like a deeper connection to people and the land. And I always use the phrase like, you know, English is like, oh, the sun is shining. In Gaelic, we say, on green, ag squilching the glock, you know?
Yes,
it's like,
yeah. Those phrases are definitely more poetic.
I know, and I love them. And I had a really amazing teacher in secondary school, actually, Miss Tobin, I'll give her a mention.
Miss Tobin.
She was, you know, at the time I didn't realize it, what she was carrying in terms of, she was really carrying this passion and enthusiasm for Irish. And she really, like, you know, she was a tough nut when it came to like, you know, learning your grammar and learning your spellings and, you know, learning the vocab. And if you got it wrong, you know, you're writing them out 100 times. But, you know, when I reflect back on the beauty in the language, then, you know, I didn't have the connection to it. I think it was like the shame, you know, it was like the shame, like, oh God, and it was clunky and it was vulnerable. I feel really, really vulnerable to speak the language, especially in front of your mates. You know, you get ripped out of it.
Yeah.
And I love, you know, I think it was Diarmuid Ling had a piece there recently where he was saying about it's okay to be corrected in Irish. You know, if you speak Irish and you get something wrong, that, you know, it's a positive thing to be corrected. And I think that's very hard on the ego for some people. So I think with Irish and learning Gaelic, I think it's a personal development practice almost.
Oh, you're totally right, Dara. And I remember having that when I was younger, you know, and even maybe when you become sort of fluent in Irish. So when I was 17, 18, I'd spent a lot of time in the Gaeltacht. I really had a passion for the language, practicing with my friends, even back in Newry and South Armagh, South Down. I met other people from other parts of the country as well, similar age. So I would practice a lot at that stage, started university here in Dublin, and I was fluent. So I thought you know, like many people, I didn't really have much more to learn, you know. But then gradually as you get older, you realise, of course, and I'm still learning at 43, there's still parts of the Irish language, even though I've been working in Irish, using it socially, and, you know, and most of my life has been through Irish for the last 25 years now. I'm still learning things, you know, and it is a bit of a, you know, the ego has to take a back step.
Yeah.
And that's fine. You know, we're all learning everything. And I had the same experience, you know, with learning Spanish and other languages too. And that's another thing that people don't really realise, who maybe the opponents of the language, or what are you going to do with Irish? You know, as soon as you connect with one language, it opens the doors to others, you know. It really, really does. And I'm certain that I learnt Spanish and Scottish Gaelic quicker because I have Irish as well, you know. So it just sort of changes something in the brain. But that learning process, you do have to take a few hits, but it's fine, you know. It's important also to have people who, you're interacting with people who are doing it in a very, you know, gentle, compassionate way. You know, perhaps you hear this sort of trope thrown out a lot. It was taught very badly. It was rammed down my throat. Now, a lot of Irish speakers, we have an issue with that. You know, we don't, maybe there's other, you know, shame elements. There's something inside ourselves too. So there's a lot more to it than just it was taught badly. Yeah. Thankfully, it's improved a lot. They've tweaked the syllabus. There's definitely more to do. But it is important to have somebody who's, you know, compassionate. It's up to us as Irish speakers, the Irish language community, to be very open. I think we are. You know, there's also a stereotype that there's like Irish speakers can be very strict and it's a closed shop. In my experience over the last quarter of a century, it's been the opposite, really, tell you the truth. I felt, you know, very welcomed. Of course, sometimes you feel a bit intimidated when you're only learning, but if you break through that, you know, it's a very close-knit community. It's a vibrant community, very open as well. People from all parts of the world. I know Irish speakers from America, you know, from Africa, from other parts of Europe. you know, and they've been welcomed in. People making the effort, you know, and it's fantastic to see. And maybe coming from the north is a bit of a different experience as well, because there was maybe an extra impetus for us, an extra incentive, you know, to learn the language. You know, again, I mentioned earlier on, living in a state that was oppressed the language. Like when Ireland was split in two, and Irish became the first official language of the Republic here in the south, you know, Irish was essentially banned in the north. You know, there's people arrested in my own town in Newry in the 1940s for putting up Irish language signs. The first people to set up Irish language schools in Belfast in the 70s were threatened with imprisonment.
Wow.
You know, it was only a couple of years ago we got some sort of official status after years of campaigning and Dram Jarrig. We took thousands and thousands of people out on the streets year after year in Belfast for demonstrations, just asking for recognition of the indigenous language of this land, you know.
Wow. Finally
we got there. So as a somebody from the north, as an Irish person from the north, obviously there was an extra, you know, maybe reason to speak Irish. So we maybe broke through some of that the awkwardness or any negativity around it. It was like something, no, this is like almost like a lifeline for us, you know.
Wow, it's amazing. I feel like, I don't know, it's like really Irish has really turned a corner in the last few years where it's like, you know, I think it's because of, you know, Mancon and Kneecap, and it's become a little bit more relatable almost. Like, I remember in school, like learning about Peg Sayers, I was like, who is this? Like, you know, it was like really old Irish, really difficult. Like, how can I connect to these stories? Maybe now I think maybe I could go back and read Peg Sayers and
Peg,
have an appreciation
Peg
of
got
her.
a bad rap, you know. She was a strong, independent woman who was living on an island, and she sort of became like the fall woman, you know, in many ways for Peg, you know, because she wrote a fantastic book and she had a lot to give. But you're right, it has become more relatable, and I think that's because of years of campaigning by the Irish language community to get better radio programs, to get a television program.
Yeah.
The Gaeilge movement has flourished over the last generation, so you have a lot more young people coming through. You have magazines, you have websites, social media. Like, technology has been a big factor in the growth of the Irish language. You know, I've said, working in media for the last 10 years, I've always said there's now more Irish being written than any other point in the history of this island, you know.
Wow.
Because of social text messages, people on X and Instagram and TikTok sending emails. Wow. You know, going back a few hundred years ago, not only was Irish banned, but it was only a certain type of person who would have written Irish regularly, you know, the poets and the scribes and the monks and so on. The average person maybe wasn't writing regularly. Now everybody's on the phone. Anybody who speaks Irish is writing every day. So technology and social media has really been a big factor, you know.
Yeah.
And then linked to that, definitely the more relatable content. Thankfully, the syllabus is gradually changing. I think a lot more can be done, both north and south, to have a lot more exciting, sexy, colourful content for students, you know, some stuff that's interesting, but it's there. TG Cahir and RTE and the local radio stations and Radio na Lifa, Radio Fáilte are doing great work, you know, so there's a lot more modern, contemporary content for Irish learners, and that's been a big factor. And you see that there's some people on TikTok and Instagram have like tens and tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of followers.
Yeah, Molly.
Molly's a great example. Yeah,
she was in Trinity when I was there.
I think
she was in similar year, but
so it's fantastic to see, you know, and like 10, 15 years ago that didn't exist. So that's been a big factor. And it also helps that we're quite a wealthy country. We're quite tech savvy.
Yeah.
You know, as a minority language, we're sort of punching above our weight, to tell you the truth. You know, if you look at languages that have more speakers than us, but maybe don't have the same state support, same state, you know, recognition status. We're also an official language of the EU. I worked for 5 years in Brussels.
That when did that kind of come into effect? Like, all the documents now have to be in English and Gaelic.
The campaign started years and years ago.
Yeah.
Fantastic man, Padraig O'Line was really the instigator of it, and Conor Gaeilge and other Irish language organisations came on board. I remember speaking at a demonstration outside the Dáil when I was a student in Trinity back in 2004.
Wow, really?
We were asking for the Irish government, because it just shows you the lack of confidence that the government had. So when Ireland became an EU member, they were asked by Brussels, "Oh, would you like Irish Gaelic to be an official language?" And they said, "Oh, no, it's okay, don't worry about us." It just shows you the heaviness was still there.
Yeah.
Every other language, every other country said, "Oh yeah, put in Danish, Swedish, you know, German."
It's wild, isn't it?
Portuguese, even smaller languages, you know. So Ireland didn't do that at the time. So it just shows you where we were as a people, as a nation. So gradually, Irish speakers had a campaign to ask the government to request status from Brussels. And they finally did that. And it came into full effect just over the last number of years. It was sort of staged, staggered in status. Some documents were translated, some services were provided. And now all legislation is translated into Irish. All the websites. It's not just a bit of a, like, nobody reads legislation, doesn't matter what language it's in. Even, you know, very, very few people need to read it, you know, on a legal basis. It's mainly done in English and in German and French. But it's there, available in every language, which is important. But the big thing for the EU is the I think the boost in confidence, it's also Irish is not only an Irish language in Ireland, it's also international. If you look at it like that, we also have a lot of learners in Australia and the States and so on. But any service the EU provides is also provided in Irish. So if you have an issue on an EU level, you can communicate with the EU institutions through Irish. All the information is available on the websites. That's what I worked on, like press releases and speeches, any information that the EU puts out. So it's great it really helps the language also back home. Some people are worried that there's going to be a bit of a brain drain of Irish speakers to Brussels, but we'll come back. There's only 200 people there. It's a fantastic community. We actually set up a festival there when I was there, and it's carrying on now. So there's a great community of Irish speakers in Brussels, but it has a brilliant positive impact back home. Just again, a lift of confidence, a lift of possibility, where we can go as a nation, as a language community.
I love that. I absolutely love that. I feel it's like, what's coming up for me there is like we're taking space again.
Yeah, that's it.
It's like
right.
We're really taking space. And I think, the Irish culture and language and people, like we've just been suppressed for so many years. What, 800 years?
yeah. Well, I won't sing the song. Yeah.
And I think we're finally in a place where, we can kind of stand proud. We can stand up for ourselves, and we can say like, here I am. And I feel like that's huge in a lot of the men's work I see as well, where guys are like not afraid to be heard, to be seen, and to be, working with their power, working with their sovereignty. And I think that's kind of like a collective level almost. It's like, look at us here, like we're Ireland, we're proud, this is our culture, and letting go of the shame and the kind of the shackles of suppression.
Definitely, Dara, and like as we know, everything's totally connected. The microcosm, the macrocosm. So what's going on a inner level is going to be reflected on a wider level, on the nation level, maybe on a level of humanity and level of the universe. So and it is taking that power, taking that control, holding that space. You put it very well. That was fantastic. Yeah, we are just reholding that space again that we once had. Before colonization happened. Gaelic society was known throughout Europe. We sort of, when the Dark Ages happened in Europe, the manuscript tradition and the Christian tradition survived through the Celtic Church in Ireland. A lot of Europe was sort of decimated. Yeah. Monks came back and sort of reintroduced many traditions and, wisdom back into Europe, even making wine. They said the northern region of Italy lost the technology and the knowledge of how to make wine.
Wow.
And it was Irish monks coming through. Parts of France hadn't lost it. Irish monks crossed the Alps and took back the winemaking tradition.
Would be the Irish monks, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I know, yeah. Like Bobbio and different towns in Italy still have this tradition, So
wow.
At one stage we were very important in Europe. We were known, we were totally connected. We were traveling to France, to Spain, to Portugal, to the Mediterranean all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And we definitely became more closed, more insular because of oppression over the centuries, And I think a lot of the energy over the last number of centuries was a reaction to that. It was maybe... And we did it maybe aggressively. We had to maybe to try and stand ground, take a stance, risings, uprisings, rebellions. But now I think we can hold power in a lot more of a settled way.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have to do it to attack anybody else, or to even to defend ourselves anymore. It's just regaining that strength. And it's not saying we don't. It's not we love our neighbours next door. We should. That's the goal.
Yeah,
we should be going towards love and connection.
100%.
Now, that wasn't all reciprocated, and we had to fight. And various reasons, there was we can understand why people had to react to that in various means. But now we're in different place, and we're coming from a sense of reconnection, knowing ourselves, being who we are, and reconnecting with the land, language, culture isn't trying to piss off somebody else. It's just trying to gain a sense of self again and a very positive light power, like a strong power, but of positivity.
100%. I was going to ask you, maybe you're kind of going to feed in some of those reflections there. Like, what do you think it means to be Irish? Big one.
Yeah, it's a big one. Yeah, I wasn't expecting this, but I guess it's connected to this island, isn't it? A lot of it is connected to this place, and we're an island off the edge of Europe. We have our own outlook. We have a very, very mixed history. But that's added a lot of colour to us, I've lived in Europe, I lived in Brussels, and I've lived in Catalonia, and my partner's Italian. So, a lot of friends from Europe. And I can see the difference, The difference is a bit more of a cheekiness, a bit more definitely a propensity towards too much crack. But that's coming from a place of pain in the past. But we deal with it, I think, through all our our faults and our massive ability to deflect any sorrow or inner pain or inner lookings. There's a lot of value in the way we interact with each other, and just a sense of sort of fun that we have, I think talking to other Europeans, it's difficult to break into. Like, I never really thought this as an Irish person, but other Europeans feel that we can be, as friends, we can be quite, in general, now this is a very broad stroke, that you might get to know us in the pub for, a couple of hours or a cafe and have a bit of crack. But a lot of Europeans feel that, or sense that would lead to something more, like a stronger connection. Where the Irish person is probably just happy to leave it like that, not see them again.
I've heard that as well. It's I don't know. I think it's like maybe a vulnerability thing.
I think it is. I think it is. It's probably coming from what we went through as a people. Yeah. We're sort of happy to sit on the surface and have brilliant crack on the surface, and people see that and that sense of devilment, But going in for deeper relationships, deeper friendships with people from other countries, I've often in work in Brussels, I would be chatting to somebody in the lift. Oh, how are you? What's the crack? Lovely day. How you doing? And then I got an email. Oh, thanks very much for your conversation in the lift. Would you like to go for a coffee? Yeah. That would never happen in Ireland. An Irish person knows that's just a bit of banter, Yeah. But the European, many, again, this broad strokes, would see this as something like, where is this relationship or friendship going to go? Yeah. Where I think us, we're sitting on the surface a bit, But it does lend to, a definite sense of fun. But there's definitely, at the switch of that, there's a definite heaviness. Mm-hmm. I feel it in the land, There's like walking through, not even bogs, places that look beautiful. Sometimes you feel a sorrowness, a sense of sorrow. And we have that tradition of an fod ochrish. There's a part of a bit of a sod or a piece of a field. If you stand on it, you'll be struck with hunger straight away. Wow. Or with sorrow. And they say perhaps that's where maybe it's a mass grave or where somebody died during the famine. And the land holds this memory, So there's a lot of beauty in the land. Where we come from this island, but over the years we suffered a lot, and you can sense that, So we have both sides of things, and I think in the past we didn't really want to look at the dark side of things. That's why there's so many alcoholics in Ireland. We went toward the pub. Everything else is a big part of our culture. I think we need to reassess that. We really need to look at why we have this uneasy and unbalanced connection with alcohol. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of younger people are sort of more open to this now and maybe looking for different ways of connecting. Yeah. But we definitely had that as well,
And I think, I've done a lot of traveling around Ireland in the last few years, mainly because I'm in love with the land again.
Brilliant,
But there still there's the scars of the famine still there from the 1800s. You still have famine villages, you still have these derelict cottages, you still have these roads that go nowhere. Mm-hmm. Ireland was one of the most connected places. Yeah. Same with the tram lines. Apparently, we had one of the most tram lines in Europe, and that all got ripped up. Yeah. But yeah, there's still these scars on the land of empty places. I read something there the other week. We're the only country with a population lower.
That's right.
Than what we had in the
couple of years ago.
What we had in the past. The only one we had 9.5 million. Yeah. And now we're only at still around 5.
Exactly. Yeah. If you put the north and south together, probably we're maybe hitting 6 or something. But you're right. Yeah, it's like it's a unique situation. And those scars are there. And one of the big scars for me is the border. As an Irishman from the north, growing up right beside the border, obviously it's a political construct. It was very physical in the past. Thankfully, that was all dismantled almost 20 years ago now. My own area, I used to open my curtains every morning. There was on the hill in front of my house, there was a British Army watchtower. Wow. South Armagh was the most militarized zone in Western Europe, for nearly 30 years. I always say, and this is a common story for everybody in the north, but helicopter noise was the soundtrack of my youth. Growing up in the 80s and 90s, and we just thought it was normal. But as you get older, you realize no, it wasn't really a normal childhood. My parents did their best to shield us from a lot of the conflict and the violence and so on, and as every parent would have done. But it did still have a bit of a ripple through effect, no doubt. But just to go back to the border and these scars, I now see the border as a scar on Mother Earth. Yeah. And the project of reunification, it'll be a massive political project. There'll be economics involved. It'll also be very cultural. But it'd be nice to see the spiritual element coming through, because I think it's a healing potential. Reunification, not only to heal different society, different groups and different communities on the island, people from an Irish background, people from a British identity, our new friends who have come to Ireland over the last number of years. But I think we also have a chance to reassess and do a bit some healing on our connection to Mother Earth, because the border is like a scar on Mother Earth herself. The metal went into the ground. There's concrete going into the ground. It was a wound, and now we're trying to heal that. And I think if we look at reunification on a spiritual level, that's what we're talking about. And if we can heal our land, we can be a shining example. The peace process in itself was a fantastic example. Now that it was flawed, it had its holes, but it did it in general at the time when it came in 1998. It was fantastic. But now we have I think over the next generation, we perhaps have an opportunity to go a bit deeper on the healing, as an island, as a people. And it's going to be difficult because, people don't want to throw maybe away certain flags, certain symbols. But if we go back to the land itself again, and this connection with the land, that's where the power is going to come from. That's where the healing is going to come from. It doesn't really matter what flag we have, what national anthem we have. But if we can come together as a people, and Ireland and Irishness as a concept can be quite broad. But if we keep sort of true to what we have, the essence of the land, the language herself, these certain the sacred places, our traditions, and if we, obviously they're going to develop and move and mold as the years go by. But if we can sort of hold true to those, I think we're going to be in a good place. And again, it's just going back to that healing element. So I don't really look at reunification as a political project anymore. When I was younger, I did. It would have been a political thing. Yeah, it still is to a certain extent. But for me, it's definitely more of almost like a therapy. It's a therapy for Ireland in general. And that's why people don't want to go near it as well. People don't want to talk about it because it's difficult to talk about it. It's still a wee bit sort of awkward for people on both sides of the border. But it's somewhere we have to go. It's like something inside yourself that you don't want to go near. As a nation, it's also something. It's the most difficult thing is going to be where your healing is. And that's for us as a nation over the next generation or two. I think reunification is that sort of healing hotspot.
Yeah, wow, so beautifully put. In the work with psychedelics and in acceptance commitment therapy, we talk about the reverse compass. So when you're in a healing journey with plant medicine, it's like turn the compass around to the stuff that you don't want to go into, and that's where the gold lies. And it's the same with the shadow work. Going into the parts of yourself that are suppressed or repressed, and the ickiness is in there, and you have to work through the shame and the guilt and the anger. I feel with Ireland, and maybe, one of my theories is why we have such a dependence on alcohol is because we have so much suppressed anger, anger at society, anger of loss of culture. And I see this in the men's work. There's like this, there's a layer of anger, and then what's underneath the anger, it's sadness, a lot of the time. It's for loss of culture, identity, land, and families hold that in, this land was taken from my great grandfather, or, people had to emigrate, children had to emigrate, mothers were angry, fathers were angry, lost children, family, never heard from them again. People were shipped off to Australia. So I think there's, when it comes to the alcohol piece, there's a lot of this anger in men, and it kind of comes out in unconscious ways. I love, again, Gabor Mate, he talks not why the addiction, but where the pain, and why the pain. Yep. So, these kind of surface level addictions of like gambling and alcohol and unconscious drug use, there's suffering there. Yeah. But this anger piece, I really see that with the North. It's one side like don't take our flags, and another side saying like, we want to take back our land. Yeah. And how do we all kind of like sit down together and see it as like ultimately trying to cultivate a better life for everybody. Yeah. This isn't it's kind of this old age divide, isn't it? Us and them, and that is just disempowering and just keeps people fighting. But ultimately, if everybody's able to sit down and come together and kind of, cultivate a better life and a richer life, and, richer in the sense of connection and community, and probably also monetary, because I hear the north of Ireland's it's struggling economically as well. Oh yeah,
and now we're out of the EU as well. We've broken the access to EU funding that the Republic and other countries have really benefited from over the years. You can just see it. The energy in the towns in the north isn't the same as it is in the Republic at the moment. When I was younger, maybe it was a bit different. The roads were slightly better in the north than they were in the south. Now it's totally switched around, And somebody who's passionate about healing Ireland and reunification, it's up to people like myself and other people to really sell this idea of that we can have a better life for everybody. Yeah. It doesn't matter what background you're from, what religion you are, what your viewpoints are about a monarchy or whatever else. Really, if just you go back to the basics, a better life, connection, and it's going to take time without a doubt, and it's going to take a lot of deep work. But it's not just on the level of the politicians, and that's what I really see now. And I'm living in Barcelona at the moment. Over the next couple of years, I'd love to come back to my own area and be involved in some of this work, because
beautiful.
It's going to need some sort of deeper level work. Imagine having a men's work session on healing Ireland, Well,
let's do it.
Yeah, or
no better man, Tommy. And it's really inspiring. And I really wish you like all the best for that, because we really need people like you in the world to hold that kind of vanguard of our culture and tradition, and you really embody it. And I really feel that, just getting you in a room with those people would just be like just so amazing.
Well, thanks very much, Darren. I was inspired by yourself over the years, doing work with yourself in the Netherlands and here in Ireland. And before I was, I got introduced to plant medicine many years ago before I met yourself, but I wasn't really aware how active it was and that there are people like yourself here in Ireland. So it's really inspiring, and there's a network growing. More people are thinking in these ways, coming from the heart, coming from compassion, really burying our souls open in these, the workshops that we do. But that's what we need to do, And you talked about sort of unconscious, use of drink and gambling and these addictions. And it's sometimes very difficult to find out, how you get to the bottom of that. But sometimes you don't even need to realize where it's coming from. Just being in these spaces, safe spaces, opening up, tears come out, but you mightn't even know where they come from.
Of course.
But they're doing some benefit.
Yeah.
And I think the more we can do this, from both sides of the border, both sides of the community in the north, all our communities, gradually, it's going to take time, but yeah, I guess people need to step forward, don't they? To take these roles, and it's difficult to do that. I've found it quite difficult over the years to take a step forward and say, "Well, I'm going to do this."
Yeah.
For certain things, it's been easy, but other more emotional side of me, it's not an easy thing to do. But gradually, with time, it sort of comes. It's a work in progress.
Quite vulnerable as well, isn't it?
Yeah, it is indeed.
To kind of be putting yourself out there and working on like the cultural trauma, ultimately, the ancestral trauma.
Definitely, and Irish people, I think, we're not the greatest for putting ourselves out there. If you look at maybe, some countries maybe take it to an extreme, but even we're not brilliant of putting ourselves out there. And it's good that we have a community focus. We're doing it for the greater good.
Yeah.
But at the same time, individuals need to find this inner strength, inner light. And in the past, definitely growing up, if somebody got too big for their boots, so to say, they were put down pretty quickly.
Tall poppy syndrome.
And I see where that's coming from, but
yeah.
I think at the same time, if people are wanting to contribute to society and have this sort of a passion for it and an ability for it, they should be cultivated. We should, cultivate each other.
Beautiful. I firmly resonate with that. We need to celebrate people who are putting themselves out there, doing the work.
Yeah.
It can be very easy to shout from the sidelines when you don't have any skin in the game.
Exactly, yeah.
But, I think people who, like yourself, go for it. We need to support, celebrate and elevate each other, and I think that's probably a big part of the cultural healing for Irish men as well.
Yep, definitely.
It's like moving out of this competitive space.
Exactly.
Being like, he's doing good work, just give him what I can. You need resources, you need a connection, like go for it, because I believe in your mission.
That's it. Yeah.
And within We're Bound we have the Imbas Ferocity, the vision, your inspiration. And I feel like, people like yourself, like having that vision and the inspiration helps to kind of bring people along.
Definitely, yeah. And Jim Ling spoke about this sort of competitive side of things. That it was sort of one of the things that turned him off the GAA at the time. Now, I'm a big GAA fan. It's like, again, from the north, it's sort of like one of the lifelines that we had, as part of our community and the identity. But in men in general, the competitive side of things is very prevalent, in sport, in business, and if we can have more people, like, maybe still it has a role, I guess. I think maybe competitiveness has some sort of role in society, but we need to, like, also incorporate the support and that's and have these visions. And, like, sometimes you sound a bit crazy, when you say certain things. You just need to put it out there,
Yeah.
These days, crazy things are said all the time online. So
plant the seeds.
Yeah, that's it.
Plants the seeds, and I think you're going to be planting a lot of seeds with. You have a podcast coming up as well, Os Gaeilge.
I do indeed, Dara. Yeah, I've again, it's sort of connected to what we were talking about. The spiritual side of the Irish language, and as I mentioned, for a lot of us in the Irish language community, it's a language. It's a social life. It's our family language. It's a language of work. But maybe the sacred element isn't that prevalent in the Irish language world itself. It exists, but maybe not as prevalent as people might presume from the outside. So I have a podcast coming about spirituality. It's called Idir Crí agus Anam.
Beautiful.
Between heart and soul. And it's only a 6-episode podcast. It's going to be coming out in a couple of months. I spoke to some fantastic people from different traditions. Michael Harding, I mentioned, the parish priest in Gaeilge, Jenny Nee Russell, Jenny for their yoga work and her chanting, her fantastic music. A number of different people. So I'm looking forward to that coming out and just sort of adding to this discourse,
Beautiful. I think it's like giving again space to those voices to be heard, giving people that kind of platform to be able to share their wisdom And I think that's a really important thing as well for Ireland, is to, we have the elders. We have the elders here in society. We need to take them back in and listen to the stories and the kind of, what's the word? Shanachis, is it?
Shanachis, yeah.
And, there's so much richness and wisdom encoded in our language and in our stories and in our myths and in our fables.
Can't either way. I couldn't have put it better, Dara.
Oh, beautiful. And so what's coming up next for you then, Tommy? The podcast, you have a book coming out?
Yeah, so I went traveling last year for 5 or 6 months in South America, and I was always fascinated by the Aztecs and Incas when I was young, but it only lasted for maybe when I was 9 or 10. I had posters on the wall. I thought it was going to be in Indiana Jones, Then I went on work experience on an archaeological dig when I was 17, and I was sitting in a field with a toothbrush, so it wasn't really like Indiana Jones. But I had this fascination with Latin America, and I studied Spanish in university, but never been. So last year I took the chance to travel from Mexico down to Chile. I spent a week with a shaman in Mexico. I was also 3 weeks with a shaman in the Amazon. And just sort of traveling by myself. My partner came out for a couple of weeks, but she had to go back to work. And I took a career break and just went traveling. I didn't intend to write a book, but I was stuck on long bus journeys, 5, 6, 7 hours more, with no internet connection, but I had my phone. And I just started taking down notes of people who I met, where I was going, just random ideas about my own journey as well. And by the time I got back to Europe, I had over 20,000 words written, mainly on the phone.
Wow.
So I said I might as well do something with this. So I'm working on that at the moment.
Beautiful.
Yeah, so hopefully that'll be ready by the end of the year.
Oh,
I have a working title is Ar Thorn na Gréine. So it's going to be in Irish. I've been writing in Irish for the last 20 odd years. Haven't written anything in English, but I think I'm going to translate this one into English, because I think there's probably there's a message in there that's going to be, of relevance for people outside the Irish language community as well. So I'll write it in Irish first and then translate it into English and maybe Spanish. So Ar Thorn na Gréine, In Search of the Sun. So it's what the shaman told me in Mexico. He said every morning, get up and worship the sun, take in the energy, take in the light. And it was a theme that sort of popped up during the journey. And it was almost like a personal pilgrimage, because I didn't intend to end it in Chile, but I ended it in Santiago, the capital. And of course, the big pilgrimage here in Europe is Camino de Santiago.
Of course, yeah.
So I went on my own sort of Camino de Santiago, to a different Santiago. And it only sort of all these ideas only came together at the end.
Wow. So
it's going to be a bit random. It's going to be an unusual book.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be also one of the first books to talk about the psychedelic experience in Irish.
Wow.
So that's going to be almost like a learning process again, trying to get the right words for this too, So hopefully that'll finish by the end of the year.
Oh, amazing. I look forward to trying to read it.
I'll get the translation done.
Oh, amazing. Yeah. Tommy, we're going to wrap up now, but I just want to ask, what advice would you give to young Irish men these days?
Great question, Dara. And maybe the first thing that strikes me, and from my own experience, is that you're not alone. I know that every man suffers to some extent. We put a good face on it. We try to look good, and we do. And it's important to be strong as well, I guess, in certain times. But there is a bit of sorrow inside us, every one of us. There's a bit of heaviness, and we're just not alone. So just start the conversations with your friend. Ask a friend how they're doing. I'm not great at it either. I want to be better at making contact with friends again. Guys I haven't seen for a few years, people I was very friendly with in school that I've sort of still friends with, but don't see them very often. I'm trying to, again, embody this every day. Try to make contact, say hello, answer the phone more, take those calls. And if they feel called, go on retreats with people like yourself, meet other people. And because we have something inside us, like men and women, we have this light inside us. It's sort of hidden. We don't know what it is or how to get it, but it's there. And if we can just sort of connect with other people to try and find it in this journey together, I think the world would be a better place.
Beautiful, Tommy. The solace within,
Yeah.
Gura Mila Magat. Thank you, Tommy.
Gura Mila Magat there. I really enjoyed this conversation. Gramor.
Yeah, Gramor. And I think one of my teachers said, was it Bear Bua August Bannocht?
Sinead Yurek.
Yeah. Yoo-hoo. Thank you, Tommy. So where can people find out about you and your work?
Yeah, so the magazine I set up years ago is a culture magazine. It covers many different topics in general culture. It's called nos.ie, nos.ie. I'm not very active on social media at the moment, but you can find me Tommy Rua, Tomairua. I used to be Rua there. I might have to change the nickname here, But I do post up some writings and poetry and translations. I'm a big fan of Ram Dass like yourself.
Yeah.
I often translate pieces from him, Thich Nhat Hanh, different traditions. I put them up in Irish. I'm going to do more of that on Instagram.
Amazing.
And the information about the podcast and the book will also be on Twitter and Instagram. So
amazing. Thank you, Tommy. Gur Magat.
Gur Magat hen, Dara.
Well, everybody, what a incredibly deep and beautiful podcast. I'm so happy to have Tommy here in the space. It brings me so much joy to know that there's someone like him in our Irish culture here, bridging both the worlds between Berla and Gaeilge. I really look forward to welcoming him back in the space. Make sure to check the show notes to connect with Tommy. What stood out for you? Drop it in the comments. Make sure to follow, like, and subscribe. And I'll see you all next week.